Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome to another 10 round head-to-head deathmatch watch boxing special. And welcome to a video that I probably should have made last year. When I reviewed the Zelos Swordfish Mark I, I referred to it as a Seiko killer. I asked why anybody would buy a Seiko Samurai when it was more expensive and less well-spec'd than the Swordfish. Now that video was very popular, but it also got more dislikes than pretty much anything else that I've ever made. People don't like it when you criticise Seiko, even though sometimes the truth hurts. So when Zelos sent me a Mark II Zelos Swordfish, I thought that was too good an opportunity for me to miss, so I bought myself a Seiko Samurai pretty much to make this video, put the two of them head to head and settle the debate once and for all. Is the Zelos really a Seiko killer? In some ways this is mainstream versus micro brand in a nutshell. What are the relative merits of buying a watch from a smaller unknown brand or a bigger very well known brand? We're about to find out. Now I've double dropped today. I put up the full review of the Zelos Swordfish. You'll be able to click on that just up there if you want to. You can watch that one either before or after this. It doesn't really matter. So let's settle this once and for all. Marquis of Queensberry rules. This could be a tough competition. The referee might have to step in if it gets too bloody. I'm expecting it to be close. So who are the contenders today? In the orange corner, we have the Seiko Samurai SRPC07. Now, I picked this one up a couple of weeks ago. I paid 400 odd Aussie dollars for it. As far as I'm concerned, all of the kind of base model Samurais would be interchangeable here. The grey one, the blue one, etc. This orange one fits into that category. I bought the orange and black because I like those colours. There are more expensive models. There's a paddy one, there's some nice blue, save the whale, save the ocean, save the dolphins, save yourself. Those would probably have scored higher in a couple of different categories. I think the Bezel Inserts are more attractive, but they are more expensive. So the base model will do just fine here today. Now perhaps the more observant of you will have noticed already, there are two Zelos Swordfish on the table. This is the forged carbon dial version, currently selling at $399 US. This is the Lume dial version on the stainless steel bracelet, currently selling at $299. I'm going to judge the Zelos Swordfish today as if you were picking up one of the $299 variants. However, I think this Lume dial looks a bit anemic, so I'm going to use this one as a sub-in at some points. Likewise, I'm going to use the forged dial as a pinch hitter when it comes to the Lume category, because it would be grossly unfair of me to compare the Lume dial variant, the kind of limited Lume dial variant, against the standard dial Seiko. It'll all work out in the wash, I'm sure. What am I not going to talk about today? Well, I'm not going to talk about water resistance. Samurai 200 meter ISO certified air divers, Swordfish 300 meters claimed but not certified. I reckon that pretty much cancels each other out today, so I'm not going to talk about that. Likewise, I'm not going to talk about the movement because they both contain the same movement. In the Seiko, it's known as the 4R35. In the micro brands, it's known as the NH35. It's the same. It's a Malaysian-made Seiko hacking and hand winding 24 jewel automatic, roughly 40-hour power reserve. Rugged, robust, reliable, accurate, a good choice for watches at this price. Alright, seconds out, round one. Let's start at the top with price/value. What are you paying for these two watches? Well, I'm going to give the Seiko a 7 here, but the Zelos already a couple of points ahead with a 9. I bought the SRPC07. $333 is the Amazon price currently. That's the link you'll find in the description of the video. All the other base models, the blue, the grey, etc. were all about that price. That's roughly what I paid for it in Australian dollars as well. The Zelos, however, at the launch special is $299 US, so it's already about 10% less than the Samurai. You also get the addition of a very nice and worthwhile Horween strap as part of the package, so I'm going to give the Zelos a 9 here today. If you're watching this video in October or November, the Zelos is back up to $349. You can knock 2 points off that. Likewise, if you can find yourself a Samurai for $275, you can add 2 points to that. But as it stands, it's a 7 for the Seiko and a 9 for the Zelos. Moving on to the second category, crystal. We're not going to be here forever, but this is one that the Seiko files I'm sure will get upset with me. I've said this every time, I don't rate Hardlex at all. All I think it is a cost-saving exercise by Seiko. It's a mineral crystal. I've never had a Hardlex crystal on a watch long-term that I have not scratched. it gets a 5. There is a spurious argument that if you hit it off a rock when you're diving, it won't shatter, it will scratch. Yes, that's true, but that is so super rare. I mean, I've scratched plenty of Hardlex. I've never scratched a sapphire crystal in 25 years of watch ownership. So the Zelos gets a very strong 9 out of 10. Dead flat sapphire crystal with anti-reflective undercoating. Normally I'd give extra points for dome, but it's such an angular watch design, both of these very similar designs, that I don't think dome would suit it, so it gets a 9 for its crystal. Moving on to bracelet. Now, please don't spit out your tea when I show you these numbers. The Seiko wins the bracelet round. Surely that can't happen very often. 8 for the Samurai bracelet, only 7 for the Zelos Swordfish. My biggest issue with this watch overall concerns the bracelet clasp, as I will show you. Samurai, definitely one of the better, if not the best, bracelets from Seiko at this kind of entry level dive price point. Solid end lengths. There is a bit of rattle between those lugs though. Now it looks like a 3-piece oyster, but these are actually only 1 link. Again, little cost saving exercises there, all brushed, touch of polish on that edge. Now the clasp, security pushers and a decent fold over, but it's only a press clasp, which you know my thoughts on these. They're not great, but it does however feature a diver's extension. Let me just kind of pop that one and show you there. If you were going to take one of these watches actually diving, this would probably be my choice. It is very comfortable though, nice fit on this one. I do quite like it, that's why it gets an 8 out of 10 today. Now the Swordfish bracelet should take this one comfortably. This should be a kind of 9 out of 10. It's nicely done, nice brush finish here, a little bit of high polish on the edge, no play between those end links at all, they're solid end links, and it is a proper custom Zelos scissor clasp there. However, my problem is with this scissor clasp. They've made it small for the V2 and I think it's too small. Doesn't give you enough space to put this watch comfortably over your wrist. It's a bit of a squeeze. If your hand is a lot bigger than your wrist, proportionally speaking, you might actually struggle to get this one on. Bit of a design fail, it's lost 2 points for that, only getting a 7 on the bracelet, which is a shame. Next category is case finish. We've had a look at the bracelets. How's about the head of the watch themselves? How are they finished? How are they machined? How do they look and how do they feel? Well, they both do rather well here. I'm going to give the Seiko a 7 on case finish. Nothing wrong with it at all. But again, I think the Zelos just goes that little bit extra. It scores 1 more point. It gets an 8. Looking at the overall design for the Samurai next to the Swordfish, I reckon Zelos have pinched more than a few elements of the case shape, the case structure. They've both got that kind of similar, angular, edgy, industrial design overall. I do like it a lot. Finish is pretty high standard on the Seiko as usual. You come to expect that from Seikos. Drilled lugs, definitely an advantage. However, unsigned crown is a bit disappointing at this price. The least they could have done is put a Seiko S in there for us. Mixture of brushed and polished, quite a fine brush on the side, a little bit of high polish there, allowing you access to that bezel as we'll see in just a minute. Solid 7 out of 10 for the Seiko. Zelos just takes that finish up a notch in my opinion. We've got a few subtle polish touches on the top of those crown guards. Crown's really nice. Zelos Z, little ring there, but it's just as grippy as the one on the Seiko. Likewise, some of the angles are curves as well. There's a little curve to that lug, touch of high polish there where the lug meets the bracelet. No gaps as discussed. Nicely finished on the bezel there also. 8 out of 10. Moving on to Bezel and Insert. Now these are both dive watches today. The bezel therefore has an important role to play, not just operationally if you do actually take this one diving, but in the overall tactile experience and how you get on with a watch long term. Again, both pretty decent results. I'm going to give the Seiko a 7. Solid if unspectacular is how I would describe the bezel insert and bezel action of the Seiko. Zelos though, once again, couple of points ahead with a 9. It is honestly one of the most robust bezel actions I've ever encountered on a watch. So a solid 7 out of 10 for the Samurai bezel and insert. Very functional, 120 click, unidirectional, as you would expect from a diver. Little recesses here on the side and on the top so you can get a grip. The bezel does protrude just a touch from the case, making that nice and easy. Clear markings on the aluminium insert, just a lume pip though, it isn't fully lumed and it is aluminium, so it will scratch and tarnish with time. A bit unspectacular in the insert, to be honest. Some of the more expensive variants do have nice patterns on those insert, but not the base models. Coin edge bezel works, but unspectacular, 7 out of 10. Bezel action on the Zelos really is pretty spectacular. Again, 120 click, but listen to it. Super robust, no bounce back plate whatsoever, and either a steel insert or a ceramic insert, both fully lumed. The bezel itself, very, very nicely machined, one of the best at the price, 9 out of 10. Next up, dial and hands, perhaps one of the slightly more subjective categories. I really like what they've done on both of these watches, so I'm going to give them a level pegging here, 8 out of 10 each. This Seiko really is a handsome beast. I'm delighted that I bought this black and orange colour scheme. Definitely more exciting than the other two base model options, the blue and the grey. Love the fact that they have blacked out those hands. They really pop against that orange background. Just applied here, so Seiko Prospect X Automatic Divers 200, denoting that it is ISO certified. Those indices are just kind of a printed on. They are fairly embossed, but they are just printed, they're not applied. But everything on this one lines up, hallelujah. Nice orange chapter ring with the minute track. It all coordinates well, handsome, legible, functional, 8 out of 10 for the Seiko. I think the Swordfish also warrants a strong 8 out of 10 for the dial and the hands. Now I'm showing you the forged carbon one, which I appreciate is more expensive. There's a Black Sands model which looks like this but is $299. That's the one I'd be going for, to be honest. Or the teal ones, whatever your preference. Sandwich dial, so there's a couple of different layers there, plenty of lume. Just a minute track around the outer edge. Nice handset. Kind of somewhere between squared off swords, squared off cathedrals, little paddle second hand there, pushing all the way out to the edge of that minute track very nicely. Zelos logo under the 12, automatic, and that 300 meters, 1,000 feet above the 6. Again, nice, clean, legible, just what you want from a dive watch, nicely proportioned, 8 out of 10. Next up, one of my personal favourite categories, lume. Again, an important factor on a dive watch, especially if you are going to get this one wet to any degree. Let's play the lume video. Seiko's well known for the prowess of their own proprietary lume, Lume Bright. The Samurai obviously on the right of the picture here. Now, not applied indices, these are only painted on as discussed in the previous section. However, the Samurai I think has got the best application of Lume Bright that I've seen from a Seiko dive watch. Heaps of it. It is massively bright and it just hangs on in there. Now the Swordfish on the other hand, Zelos well known for their lume. Again, they tend to do these two-tone lumes, BGW9 and C3. Now this is the carbon dial one, so it's slightly duller, and that ceramic bezel insert doesn't hang on as well as the bezel inserts on the steel versions of this Swordfish. So the bezel fades a little bit quicker than the Seiko, as you'll see towards the end of this video. But here we are about 15 minutes in and they're both hanging on very well indeed. I think this one is too close to call, which is why I gave them both an 8. Another dead heat, another draw in this particular round. You're not going to feel shortchanged by either of these watches if you're into lume. Alright, now we're getting down to the meaty end of the judging process today, and the only round which is double weighted, it's brand. Now this is all fairly objective, fairly material. These two always get a little bit more subjective. I get to add my own personal thoughts about the relative merits of owning a Seiko or owning a Zelos. Now, what do I think then? I think that for $300, if you're buying a $300 dive watch, there's not much that has more brand cachet on your wrist than Seiko. You can just about squeeze into the occasional Swiss watch, but I think Seiko has some serious clout, serious credentials, and serious respect for dive watches at $300, which is why it gets a 9, double weighted to 18. It's a big win for the Seiko on the brand category. As always, it's a big powerhouse of a brand. They've been making watches for 100 odd years, very well known, very well respected. Zelos, on the other hand, can't quite match that status. It gets a 6 though. As I said, I think there's a bit of a cult beginning to build around Zelos. Lots of people buy these in big numbers. They've got 4, 5, 6 of these pieces in their collection, and that says good things about the brand. I appreciate not everybody's going to rush out and buy a Zelos. Maybe it's just too new a company for some, but I think it's certainly one of the better micro brands that I've reviewed on the channel so far, and I think there's a bit of credit, bit of respectability for guys who are into these watches, who are well aware of the quality that Zelos offers. But 6 double weighted to 12, it loses some serious ground to Seiko in this category. And last but not least, it's XFactor, possibly the most subjective category of all. When you look down at your wrist, do you get that little tingle in the pit of your stomach? Is there something a bit special about the watch? I think in both cases here, again, it's a 7 out of 10 each. The Samurai perhaps doesn't quite have the cachet that the SKX has. It's certainly not a movie star, doesn't have the rich history of the SKX as a model. Don't forget that the Samurai is the name that the Seiko fanboys have called it. It's an SRPC 07 coming out of the factory, so no XFactor in the name there. The Zelos Swordfish, for the same reasons I just talked about, and brand, that kind of cult following, I think this one has got a little bit of the magic about it, particularly if you go for one of those interesting colorways at the $299. It's a very handsome, very good looking watch, and one that I would be just as happy to look at on my wrist long term as the Seiko Samurai. So I'm going to score them both equally for that XFactor. So, drum roll please, it's the big reveal, and that reveal is 75% for the Samurai, 77% for the Zelos. So, on paper anyway, the Zelos is indeed the Seiko killer that I've been claiming it to be. I think materially, if you look at where it scores its points, it's the better watch. It is better spec, it is better price, I think it is better made, and I think it is just as good looking as the Samurai. Can't cope with the Seiko on brand though, that's for sure, and I admit that some of you will not be tempted, regardless of the price and the specs. You will not be tempted away from the solidity, the known quantity that you get from a Seiko dive watch. Now, people get a little bit upset when I criticise Seiko or when anybody else criticises Seiko. It's like me saying something nasty about your granny, I understand that. But Seiko cut corners. That Hardlex crystal isn't good enough. Press clasps at $300+ I don't think are good enough as well. Aluminium bezel insert, nothing spectacular. They do cut corners on specs, knowing that you'll rock up and you'll pay the money anyway because you love the brand. 75 and 77, I think that's about the closest I've had for any of these head-to-head watchboxing specials. These are both great watches, don't get me wrong. I would happily recommend either or both of these watches to you. Indeed, I'm going to do a top 10 divers under $400 US. Both of these watches will be featuring. I've reviewed so many watches at or around this price. These two definitely should be on your shopping list if you're looking for a diver. So like I said, if the Zelos has gone to full price, it's probably a dead heat. If you can find a bargain Seiko, it probably gets a few more points. Likewise, you can remedy that poor crystal score by sticking in a piece of sapphire, but that'll bring the value count right back down again because that ain't cheap. Similarly, you can add a Lume ceramic bezel insert, but they're about $40 as well. So there are ways to remedy some of the failings of the Seiko, but they're not cheap. Most of those failings have already been remedied if you buy a Swordfish in the first place. So I'm glad I spent the money and took the time putting these two watches head to head, proving that I wasn't mad when I said that this one was a Seiko killer last year. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.